and good afternoon, or wait a minute, no. Oh dear, it's still morning. Feels like afternoon. I've been up for a long time, people. It's very sunny and nice in downtown Binghamton today. So we walked the dog early, and that's why my time is kind of screwed up right now. I think, hey, it must be lunchtime if I already walked the dog. This is Yvonne DeVita. You're watching Smart Conversations. And today we're going to talk about video. How much video do you have on your website? How much video are you willing to actually appear in? And should you? Doesn't matter if you're in the video or not. We're going to talk with my special guest today, Kayla O'Brien, who is an award-winning, Emmy award-winning video journalist. I'm going to tell you more about that in a minute, but Kayla, I want to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure. It's going to be fun.
Yes, it's going to be lots of fun and lots of teaching or talking or learning and things like that, because video is so vital and important to what everyone's doing today. But let me just share just a little bit here about our guest. Kayla O'Brien is an Emmy award-winning video journalist who loves helping businesses and brands experience the power of video storytelling. So now right away, folks, you know why I brought her on the show, because she used the word storytelling. Before launching Kayla O'Brien Media, Kayla worked as a video journalist in TV news, newspaper, and for a national digital media startup. So I really want to hear about the Emmy Award a little bit first. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So that was actually surprisingly during my time with the Orlando Sentinel, which is the big newspaper in town. Okay. The only newspaper really that's left in our downtown area in Orlando. But in the last 6 or 7 years, even the newspaper has had a really big focus on video content, creating video in a lot of different forms, short documentaries, quick news videos, because of how important that medium is. As you talked about, I mean, it's everywhere, and it's the most important thing right now in 2021, in my opinion, is getting things out quickly and holding people's attention. Video is where it's at. So the Orlando Sentinel invested a lot of money in a video team, and I came on board after working in TV news to work there. And then in 2016, I'm sure most everyone knows that the Pulse nightclub shooting happened in Orlando, which the club is actually like a mile away from where we are right now. So it was a huge, it was a huge part of my community where I live, and also, you know, Orlando's general fabric. When this happened, it was a huge deal. And at the time, it was the deadliest mass shooting in US history. That's now been surpassed by the shooting in Las Vegas, which is a crazy thing to say. But 2 years after Pulse, I mean, people were still going to the memorials and talking about the victims and talking about what had happened. So we sat down with some survivors who are actually in the club. Oh, wow. We talked to the mayor, we talked to leaders of advocacy groups that had started because of what happened at Pulse. And we just basically said, what's changed in 2 years? And it was a documentary short film style piece. And we really let the characters do the talking. And so in 2018, that was the Emmy award-winning video. So it was myself and then another photojournalist that did the photography section of the video, because we did the video as well as the newspaper aspect. So it was kind of a collaborative effort, but I led the video side of that. So if you can see, I don't know if it's too blurry, but it's on my back wall.
I can see it.
As proof and as a reminder to myself that, you know, that's where I came from. I'm now working in my own business, but my background really is, like you said, storytelling and journalism.
Well, and I love that part of it. I love that you used the word storytelling. And we met through another smart conversation I did with someone called Melanie Hicks, who is had Kayla come and do her book trailer. So book trailers are a really important thing for authors. Kayla, you and I talked recently about how to use book trailers really effectively. Talk a little bit about that, because you have the inside scoop on it.
Sure. I mean, as you know, again, there's so much competition, especially with writing books, and it's hard to stand out sometimes. You really need to put your face out there, your story out there. You need to be talking about that you wrote a book to get people interested and to want to make them become readers and then supporters of you. And so, like I said, a minute ago, that video is the #1 way, in my opinion, to get anything across in a fast, digestible way that makes people connect with you. So you think about photo, which is great. I love photography, but you don't get to hear anything from a photo. I love writing, but you don't get to see anything from pages. So video combines everything. You can have text on screen, you can have the sound, you can have, see yourself, see a real 3D person. So that's why I push it so much, and that's why I focus primarily on video, is because it works so well. When it comes to being a writer and an author, I mean, a lot of people are selling books, self-publishing, selling books through the internet, but they don't necessarily market on the internet. Maybe they have more word of mouth, in-person speeches or, readings, but video, you can kind of combine all those things in one and share it at scale. So there's really no formula, because people ask me that, like, what's the formula to the best book trailer? And there's really no one formula. Yeah, they're like, should I have it be 30 seconds or 2 minutes, or what's like the magical ratio? And the answer is there's really not one. It really depends on who you are as a person and who you are as a writer. So if you're the type that really likes to be on camera and wants to be the star of the show, and that's what your book is kind of about, then do that. Let's have you on camera the whole time. Some people are just like, no, I'm the writer, I'm behind the screen, I don't want to be on camera at all. There's still a way to do it, but in a very tasteful way, where you're talking to your audience, but you're not the star of the show. Or there's ways to include other people who have read your book and they want to talk about it for you. So there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. There's no one right way, there's no one right length, but it really is up to the person. And the only goal I have is, did you get across what you wanted to get across? And if that's accomplished in any amount of time, then it's a success in my eyes.
Yeah, that really, really makes sense. The message, you have to have the message and know what the message is. And the beauty of it is, if you're an author and you're writing the book, you can do some trailers leading up to. You can talk about writing and the writing process, and you can even share some of the content before it is published in the book. But one thing that I think you were saying that struck me is that you can do it so many different ways. It doesn't have, you can be the one on camera, or you can have fans. So I like to say, let's build you a fan club. If we can build you a fan club, then when the book is launched, you will, be very much successful. So when I saw Melanie Hicks's, everyone, I will put a link to the video I'm talking about in the notes. But when I saw that, I was really, really impressed, because it did get the message across. She was on, but not all the time. Yep. And I just really felt like I got to know her. This is even before she was on my show. So you did a really good job. How much is the author involved in that? And how much is just you doing the shooting of the video?
Well, again, it really depends on how comfortable you are in that process. So Melanie is, pretty comfortable and good on camera. So she didn't need a whole lot of coaching to get that out of her. She has it like living inside of her, and I just needed to turn the camera on and she delivered. But previous to our shooting, so the day of the shoot, we met at a yoga studio. I had booked the space. It was beautiful. It was like great lighting, and it was right by the beach. So, that helps to have a comfortable space. And it was just her and I shoot, I shoot most of my video by myself. Sometimes I'll bring in a second person to help, but usually it's just me and the person I'm talking to. And she and I had talked about it, what we wanted to get out in the video. So what was the point? And, she told me basically the concept of the book and her philosophy on life. And so together she had some things that she wanted to make sure was included. So we had a little outline, nothing written like in paragraph form or anything, not like the writer's style. It was more off the cuff, but she knew points that she wanted to include. And then from that conversation, so it was like, so tell me about your book, a very open-ended question. Tell me about your philosophy. And she would go and talk and just kind of, because she's really good at that. So that's a style that I would recommend for her. If you have like enough to say and you want to say it, I'm going to let you go, and then we can edit from there. And then from what she would say, I would follow up and ask her additional questions. So you said that, you mentioned pulling things out of the attic. What do you mean by that? And then she would say, well, and then go into more detail about certain things that I found interesting.
Yeah.
And so from, I think the end video is about 2.5 minutes. The longest form, we cut a few different versions. And that's something we can talk about too, about how to get the most out of your shoot.
Yes.
But the longest version, I think, was about 2.5 minutes. And we talked for probably about 45 minutes on camera. And all the rest of that footage still lives on my hard drive, but it didn't fit that right format. But it doesn't mean that it didn't help her get to what actually was included. So I find it really important to actually have those conversations as long as you need to on camera, so that we can take the best stuff and actually include it in the video.
Well, that's really illuminating, because I want people to understand that you can create, as you said, 15 minutes and take only 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever it is. But the beauty and you're the talent behind that, because I could not do that. I could do a 15-minute video, but I couldn't then edit it. Talk about cutting and editing and things like that. I mean, I think that's a really big part of what you do and what has to happen, because I'll compare it a little bit to the book writing and my role. So the author writes the book, but then I'm the developmental editor, and I go in then and I say, this doesn't belong here, or this word isn't quite right, or I didn't understand what you meant here, so can you fix it? So talk about how you do your editing.
I'm very similar in that role as an editor, as a book editor would most likely be, because I've gotten very used to, in my journalistic career, just cutting things. You cannot fall in love with any one part of your video or else you're going to be, heartbroken by the end. So I try to make that clear and say, if you want to have this point in there, we can get that in there. But if you go on for 15 minutes, it's not going to be what you want it to be, or what the goal of this is to keep people engaged in this video. Yeah. So I will pick the best things to flow it in a way that makes sense. And even in a short video like that, you want to have a beginning, a middle, and a wrap up. And even though, you can say your facts and your dates and certain things that you want to accomplish, there still needs to be like what's the spark? Why are we watching this video? What's the meat of it? And then what can I do now? And that's basically the little format that I try to fix and then fit into everything. And then if you can fill in the blanks there, great. And then we're off to a great start. And when it comes to editing, there's so many things you can do now. I mean, editing has come a long way, video editing, since I started. I started in high school and we were using tapes. I mean, I'm not that old. I just turned 30 last week. And, I was using tapes in high school, and we would do tape to tape editing, where you put the tape in, you play it, and then you record on a new tape. So from that point to now, having, the technology that we do, you can do so many things. I added music, I added graphics, I have access to thousands of hours of B-roll, which is essentially video that you put on top of someone speaking. So for Melanie, we had B-roll that I shot of her walking around on the side of like not an ocean, but side of like the intercoastal. There was boats and there was, people walking, and it was just like a calm B-roll shoot. But then also she talks about women who have different goals and dreams. So I included women that were in the workforce, who are pursuing ballet, like different B-roll clips to take her point and amplify it to make it make even more sense. So you're hearing her say women who have different desires, and then you're seeing a woman perform ballet on a stage. It's like, okay, now I understand what type of person this is targeting. Right. And the way, cutting, I can cut, and I don't recommend this necessarily, but worst case scenario, you have a sentence that is wordy. You can cut out all the ums and ahs and make it sound like it was flawless.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's issues. You don't want to do that too much, but there really is so many ways that you can, fix it up in the editing process that it's really not as stressful as I think people make it out to be. Like, it has to be perfect when I say it on camera. It's like,
Right.
it would be great, but also don't worry about it, because we can, tweak it and you won't even know the difference.
Well, yeah, and I think also people don't want you to read a script. People want the authenticity. And if
Sure.
we're still talking about authors and book trailers, you should know your book. So you should be able then to speak to why you wrote the book. Who was the book for? What will the book accomplish? What will people get from the book? And then you could, as the videographer, put up little clips of the book, of a page or a call out or something in the book that was there.
Yep.
And I think a really fascinating part for me is how at your end, well, first of all, lighting better than the average person, right? I mean, you're going to know where
I try.
the lighting is. Lighting is so important. But then having that music, having that access to it, because you're a videographer, so you have it. I don't have it on my computer. Having the tools, if the author said, oh, I do want you to cut out those ums and ahs, please, you have the tools and you know how. And basically talk a little bit about what a videographer is, as far as, because you have a story also. You're part of the story when you become the videographer of anybody, whatever you're shooting, you become, like when you did the Emmy. I mean, you were part of that story because you lived there, you understood it, you knew what happened, you kind of knew the right questions.
Sure.
And I think it's really fantastic the way you worked with Melanie in asking questions. Talk a little bit about that and your experience, and how you're still a young woman, but you have this experience. You know how to do it. It's
Yeah. It's funny because when I first started as a journalist, I was nervous, obviously, to ask the wrong question.
right.
And so I would get tripped up a little bit about, okay, having a list of questions that I wanted to make sure I got through, and I would prepare in advance. And it makes people uncomfortable, I think, to see me looking down at my paper in like terror, and then, what is your name? Like, it helps get through the jitters when you're younger. But now it's really a basic concept of, if you're listening, just listen. That's the most important thing. So if Melanie's speaking about her book and she mentions something that sparks something in me because I'm listening to her, there's no problem with me asking a follow-up. And I always say in the beginning of an interview, I say, if there's anything that I ask you that you do not want to answer, don't feel obligated to answer it. You can say, no, I don't like that one, and I'm not going to be offended. Like this, the point of the video is to get what you want out of it. So if I think something's interesting and you're like, I don't want to go there, fine, that's great. There's no hard, I'm not going to say, oh, well, the interview's over, no more, it's for you. And I think that's the biggest key is not, and it bothers me. This is kind of an off aside, but in journalism, sometimes, and especially in sports, if you really watch sports journalism, like in the big conference rooms after a game, the player will say something and it's interesting, but then the reporter asks the next question in their lineup and totally misses an opportunity to dive deeper into something. And it drives me insane. So I'm like, if everyone just, as a videographer that's doing an interview, was to just take a little bit of time and think about what they just said, and get all your gear set up and ready to go so you can trust it, but not be so worried about like, oh, is the focus ready? Is it good? It's like, trust your gear. It's going to work. Focus on the conversation in front of you, and you're going to get the best stuff.
So what should a author look for if they're looking for a videographer? I mean, what are some key things you've already told us probably what we need: someone who listens. That's
Yeah.
really a really big thing. But also, I think someone who can make an uncomfortable person more comfortable.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, I would think, shop around a little bit. There's no harm in speaking to a videographer, having a Zoom call, and then talking to another one and seeing which one you like better. I mean, there's nothing, you don't have to pick the one that, your friend recommended necessarily. You might not jive together, or it may be a perfect fit. But I think, yeah, talking to a person, seeing if they understand where you're coming from. Some people, that they think all videographers have the same skill set, and it's hard. It's like saying every author you meet has exactly the same skills. And I would, doubt that. Some people are great at fiction. Some people are great at business writing.
Right.
They may not be great at each other's craft. So for videographers, there's wedding videographers that shoot weddings, primarily, and they're really good at capturing the speeches, capturing the dances. They have a lot of high pressure to get that done. But for me, I do a lot of more slow, let's get this out of you. Like, don't worry about the camera. We'll set it up for you in a certain way that'll make you comfortable, but that might not translate back and forth. So finding someone who has experience with interviews, with putting together stories, I think is really important. If the person is, interested in even scripted, like short films, I think would even be better than someone who just does tutorial corporate content. Because when you're writing like a short film, you really have to understand character. You have to understand beginning, middle, and end. You have to understand how to wrap something up. What is drama? What is funny? What is not? So someone who kind of gets that aspect, I think, will benefit. That type of videographer will have a better chance to get exactly what you're asking for in an interview, in a book trailer, and that sort of thing. Maybe then, the technical part is a lot easier now because we have the technology. And, worst case scenario, you put the camera on auto. I would never do that. But if worst case scenario, you put the camera on auto, it probably will do 50% to 75% of what you need it to do. The extra parts are great, but I would probably spend a little more time figuring out which videographer has that extra storytelling ability to get you over the hump of being comfortable.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's a really big part of what I would like to impress on people, anyone watching, especially any authors, because the storytelling part, I tell people everything we do is kind of a story. It's part of the story of who we are and the story of our neighborhood and everything. And so with authors in nonfiction, I primarily work in nonfiction. I think that it's possible you could have an author that was a little too pushy, maybe, and not as sometimes nonfiction authors are so wrapped up in their story because they're telling their story, and the purpose is to help other people with it. It isn't like they're telling it. Most of them aren't telling it just because they're pompous, but then they might come to you, and how would you help them understand that, okay, let's calm down and relax, and let's just do this and not be too didactic and pushy?
Yeah, I think it's all part of the prep. I think, once you're actually sitting down with the videographer, you should have at least the beginnings or the understanding, the agreement of what you're trying to get out of this piece. So with Melanie, we spoke on Zoom, probably 30 minutes to 45 minutes about what she was all about. It helped me understand her. So I wouldn't sit down with her that day, put the camera on and say, okay, who are you? And have no clue, because that would lead to a lot longer of a process to unravel.
Right.
So, and she was really good, thankfully. She was really good about who her audience was. She had pages of who she wanted to target. So that helps a lot because she knows who she's talking to. But yeah, if someone was talking about themselves a lot, or, listing my accomplishments, I probably would cut that out for the most part, because like you said, it's about the viewer. Unless you're building credibility at the top, that is going to make sense in the middle.
Right.
So, like, I'm an Emmy-winning journalist. Now I'm here to tell you about how to win an Emmy. That, of course, makes sense. But if you're a former physician and you're talking about your, time as a grandmother, does it really matter? Probably not. And I don't think unless it really correlates with what you're speaking about, you got to take all that stuff away, especially awards too. I know it's important for some people to have like, I won the, Missouri Book Fair award. It's like, unless that's really important to your viewer, which most likely they have no idea what that award is,
right.
Let's take it out. We want to focus on who the person watching, are they going to be touched by this? Are they going to want to buy this book because of what you're saying? Listing an award, I don't think so. Listing where you went to college, not really important, unless it makes sense in the book and will be a credibility builder for your explanation. But yeah, anything that's really just listing or talking about, something that's off topic, but it's important to you, let's cut it and then stick to what the person watching, the viewer, the camera lens behind, who's watching this, from behind the camera, what are they getting out of this? It's a hard thing to do. Trust, it's very hard to like think about that. Like, okay, this isn't about me. This is about who I'm speaking to.
Because if I'm writing a book, I'm thinking it is about me because it's me and it's my story. But you're absolutely right, because the story I tell my authors, it's really not your story anymore. After this, it's the audience, it's their story. And if you haven't made it their story, then kind of the message has not probably gotten across. So in a book trailer, I could see that being so important to kind of let someone who wasn't comfortable say a lot of things and talk a lot so that you can cut it out and they would understand that. Because do you find, I'm curious, do you find that the more someone gets to talking, the more comfortable and more relaxed they get?
Always. Yes, usually. I mean, it's very rare that someone comes in very comfortable and then gets more anxious as time goes on. Usually it's the opposite. So I'll try to ask questions that are very open-ended at the top. Like, tell me about yourself. I know that's hard to do, but it gets you talking in a longer form. And once you get that first, like, breath of air out, you feel so much better. And then you realize like, oh, she's not lying. There's not going to come, a reality TV crew is going to come in and like have the camera in my face. Like, it is just a conversation between two people. There happens to be a camera on. It's really low pressure. It's not live TV. That's what I try to tell everyone. Like, live TV, be nervous. This, no, don't worry about it. And everything's edited. So yeah, the more you get going, there's a time limit. You don't want to get fatigued. You don't want to be talking for 4 hours. And then at the end, you're like, okay, I'm exhausted, because it is you're presenting, you're on. So it is kind of tiring after a while. But yeah, between the, probably 5 minutes in is where I start to feel like, okay, that was good. Oh yeah, let's keep going down this road. And then always, if there's things I remember that at the top weren't great, I'll ask that question again. And by the end, you might have already calmed down enough to get that information out, and then we're golden.
It's interesting that one of the things that I was thinking while you were talking is the importance of having a live videographer, having a real person there to do what you do, as opposed to me sitting at my desk and saying, I'm going to make my book trailer by just talking about my book, which you can do. I'm not saying people can't do it, but how much more powerful of a video comes across when I'm actually talking to another person who's sort of like an interview, and that's just really powerful. I hope people take away that.
Yeah. And I think about Oprah, she made that what it was. The show was the Oprah show, but it wasn't about her ever. It was about the people and the guests that were there to tell their story. And she was just there to facilitate. And that's basically my role, but I'm off camera. So tell me about this. Oh, that's interesting. Oh yeah, let's, continue on that path. She's storytelling. Oprah's the one storytelling because she's guiding the conversation, but you're the one telling the story. So you think about those people in those interviews and how they feel and what they reveal versus them sitting in front of a camera saying, hello, my book is coming out on this day and hope to see you there. It's just, it's a different vibe. And humans want to talk. That's our, innate ability, is to be able to communicate with each other and cooperate. So just kind of keying into those primal instincts is sharing your story. Who are you? It really starts to become more and more easy through
Yeah, and
time.
I think this kind of takes us all the way back to the fact that video is so important today. If you're doing business on the web, whether you're writing a book or not writing a book, if you're on the web and you have a business, it behooves you to have some video. Now, can you create? I've created some short videos myself, but how much more powerful would it be to work with someone like Kayla O'Brien and have, and I want to say a professional, because it is a professional thing. It's when you, as a business person, decide that this is what you want to do and you want your business to be successful, you need to say to yourself, well, what other things need to happen? Well, video could be, and I'm not saying that you have to have video on every page or anything, but maybe you have a really nice one or two videos that you put in your about page, that you put on your home page. And those to me would be ones that you want to do with someone like Kayla.
Yeah, definitely. I'm more about quality over quantity. Quantity is great. If you have a YouTube channel or if you're doing a podcast, you want to have a lot of guests, you want to have a lot of episodes. But for this style video we're talking about, having one is amazing. Having more than one, even better, but you don't want to clutter your website with video. You want someone to watch your video and understand the essence of what you're trying to accomplish. So that's to sell your book or have people understand who you are or to work with you. You want to have that
but we didn't get to, and we have to get to the fact that, so let's say you're working with Kayla and you do a half an hour shoot. Well, that takes maybe 4 hours, but out of that 4 hours or half an hour, you can get 3 or 4 videos. Kayla can put together 3 or 4 different message videos that are going to be very powerful. I mean, isn't that true, Kayla?
Yeah, and with Melanie too, I spoke about this earlier, but she has a long cut, a medium cut, a short cut. So that's basically someone who's got 30 seconds to watch, someone who's got a minute to watch, and someone who's got a lot of time and is invested in that 2.5-minute video. And those can be 3 different videos, different cuts, different, transitions, that sort of thing, different vibes. But you can also do it based on content. So we're talking about one aspect of your book, or we're talking about you as an author, or we're talking about, what it felt like to do this XYZ while you were writing. And we shoot it all on the same day. We don't have to go meet 20 times to do this.
Yes.
We shoot all the content one day, and then through editing, I can cut different versions so that you have like a year's worth of content from that one day of meeting. And I think that's something that people don't think about. They think, oh, I'm gonna have to hire someone 100 times. But with planning, we can do it a lot easier, and it'll look like, wow, she's really been dedicated to making these videos. And it's like, I only went for 2 hours, That's on my end to make it look different.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's a good place for us to wrap up today, because the power of what you just said, working with a professional videographer and then having that videographer pull out clips, different messages, different parts of the story, wow, it just blows my mind, the power of that and the value of it to anybody who's in business today on the web.
Yeah.
Kayla, this has been really, really fantastic. I am so glad that I got to meet you and that we got to talk about this. I hope that people learned something new or something that validates their wish to hire a videographer, because when you're an author, especially, I tell them all the time, it's like starting another small business. And so one of the things that's really valuable and necessary is having video today. So I hope that you'll think about hiring Kayla. By the way, Kayla, talk a little bit before we go about the fact that even if I'm in some other state, I can still work with you.
Yeah, so Melanie lives in Colorado. I live in Florida, and she actually was in town, so we shot together. But the way that video is so available nowadays, I can hire myself, contract out a videographer that I can work with and coordinate with to meet with you, sit down, have this interview style that we've been talking about during this talk, and I can control the editing. They can send me the footage and we can edit it as if I was the one there shooting. So if you're in Montana, we can still work together and put together a really, really high quality piece. There'll just be another shooter involved, but that's okay. Or if you wanted me to fly out, I'm all for that too.
Yeah, exactly. That would be awesome. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, from Smart Conversations, this is Yvonne DeVita. My guest, Kayla O'Brien, is a videographer, and she shared a really, really lot of great points about how and why video today is where you have to be. And Kayla, I will have this up on the web and on YouTube, and I'll let you know, and everybody else, all your social links. Your site is Kayla O'Brien Media.com. And that's where people can go. But of course, I'll have it all links put in the thing. And this was delightful. I can't thank you enough for being here.
Yeah, thank you. It was great.